$12 trillion in residential real estate, 12 trillion, compared with 4.3 trillion in superannuation, 3.6 trillion in listed stocks, 1.3 trillion in commercial real estate. But this is a killer. 55.5% of household wealth is held in housing. And I think to myself, what? That cannot be good.
No, that's very interesting because that data comes from Cotality's, I think, the latest chart, their latest November chart pack, I think it is.
Yes,
but it's interesting. So in the back of that chart pack, there's actually a slide or a chart that shows that the total value of Australia's dwelling stock. So that's basically every single home in the country. You just think about every single, 11.3 million homes, I think it is, in the country. They're now worth $12 trillion. And, that's over 4 times GDP. And the scary thing about that, Martin, is that 9 years ago, it was worth $6 trillion. So in just 9 years, the value of Australia's housing stock has doubled, which is just insane when you think about it. And, the other scary factor about that, I wrote an article on it last week, is that if you divide that 12 trillion by the number of dwellings in Australia, it means that the average home in Australia, so we're not just talking about Sydney homes here, we're talking about, in the middle of, the back arts, well, I shouldn't say that, so the back of Buggery, wherever the hell it is, back of Burke, I should say, a little shack out there, or a little bedsit apartments, the whole life. If you average out every single dwelling in the country, they're now worth, on average, $1,050,000. Right? That is just an extraordinary volume of money. And it's the principal reason why Australian households are now supposedly the second most wealthiest households in the world, according to the UBS Global Wealth Report. Now, we rank the second highest. Well, the reason for that is because we've got expensive homes, right? So, as you said, it's about 55% of our wealth is tied up in housing. Well, according to the UBS Global Wealth Report, we stand out from other countries in how much of our wealth is stored in illiquid homes, whereas other countries on that list actually have their wealth predominantly in financial assets, which you can eat. Like, you can sell that and you can buy food and whatever. But ours is stored primarily in the homes that we live in. So what good is it to you? Like, my home is supposedly worth $2.5 million roughly, right? I'm not boasting. I'm just saying it's ridiculous. I bought that, 12 years ago or something in Melbourne. And what difference does it make if it's worth 5 or it's worth 1? Like, I'm still living here, right? So it makes no difference. And my mum's house, for example, she bought in 1972 for $17,500 in Melbourne. Well, it's probably, it'd be worth, heaps now. But would it have mattered if that house rose by half as much versus what it is now? Like, she's no better or worse off. She's just living in the house, right? It doesn't matter what it's worth. It's all paper wealth. It doesn't do anything. And, unless you're a property investor, it does zero for you. And because everyone needs a home to live in. So, if she sells her house and buys another one, or I sell my house and buy another one, well, you buy and sell into the same market. So you can't take it with you. You just end up paying more for the next house because yours has gone up. So the next house has gone up as well. You just pay more in stamp duty and all that sort of stuff. So it's absolutely useless wealth when you think about it. And here's the other thing, Martin. So, we're the second wealthiest households in the world. Yeah, okay, that's great. No, it's not. But if you actually went back to 1991, so I did this analysis a while back. So in the 1991 census, the home ownership rate in Australia was actually 5% higher than it is now, right? But homes were only worth 3 times incomes back in 1991. They're now 8 times incomes now. So notionally, we're wealthier now because our homes are worth 8 times income and we're sitting on this massive asset. But I'd argue that we're actually better off in 1991 because the home ownership rate was, 5% higher than it is now. We had way less mortgage debt as a proportion of income. So we're less indebted. And the banking system back in 1991 lent 2/3 to businesses and only 25% to mortgages, and the rest was for personal lending. Nowadays, it lends almost 2/3 to mortgages, and businesses, get about 30% of lending. So the economy was arguably a lot more structurally sound back in 1991 as well, because we actually had a more diversified economy. We had a manufacturing industry. We had far cheaper housing. We had a banking system that actually lent productively to businesses. We had a higher home ownership rate, But if you use these global wealth rankings, we're actually a lot poorer back then because our homes are only worth 3 times income versus 8 times now. But this is why these wealth statistics are complete rubbish. Right? We shouldn't even count really housing wealth as wealth because it's really a cost. Right? It's just a cost. And is paying a higher lifetime share of your income to put a roof over your head, whether that's to rent or buy or to pay off a mortgage, is that better off than? Are you better off than paying a lower share of your lifetime's earnings to put a roof over your head, as you would have in 1991? I think you're actually better off. So I think actually, when in the true word of wealth, in terms of quality of life and how much lifetime's earnings you have to spend on housing, and how much more disposable income you have, and how much more balanced the economy was, etc. We're actually a lot better when in 1991 we're in a homes worth 3 times income, not 8 times now. So. Yeah, it's all a bit of a farce, this whole, household wealth thing. If your house goes up, you're rich. It doesn't do anything for you. And in my case, I've got a 17-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter. And I'm like, well, I'm actually pretty happy that Melbourne house prices haven't gone up in 7 years. So my home's worth about, exactly the same as what it was 7 or 8 years ago. But that's actually a good thing. Like I don't go, oh, gee, this sucks. My house hasn't gone up like it has in Brisbane and all these other places. Because A, it doesn't do anything for you because I live in Melbourne. B, it'll just screw over my kids because, had it gone up another $1 million, well, then my kids were never going to be able to buy a house or afford to, purchase a house. The dream of home ownership is dead. And then, of course, it also means that I'll have to help them into the market anyway through the bank of mum and dad because, even though Melbourne's done nothing for years, it's still too expensive for them. So if your house price goes up and you've got children, you just end up having to spend more to help them into the market. So you're worse off there as well. So, Australia's just got to get off this high horse about house prices. Pretty much every conversation you have now, whether you go to parties and that, it always gets back to house prices. In fact, actually, I shouldn't say every conversation. I actually went to my 30-year school reunion last Friday. That's how old I am now. And not one person mentioned housing, which was unbelievable. So that was actually quite refreshing. But, that's the exception, not the norm. Most times you go somewhere, everyone's talking about the housing market. It's tedious. It's been tedious for 12 years. This house price bubble that Australia has, and I call it a bubble because Jared Minack did a fantastic chart. And he showed, I've actually got it on the slide, and he showed that that Australia's land value. So land values in Australia, residential land values, make up 75% of total dwelling values. So it's the land price that drives up the price of housing. It's not the structures, it's not the buildings, the bricks and whatever that go on it. And Jared Minack actually showed that Australia's land value to GDP, which is the bottom chart on the right here, currently is the same as what Japan's was in the late 1980s during the great Japanese land bubble. Just before it all busted and they had a 30-year recession basically. So if Japan's housing market was a bubble back in the late 90s with a land value that was about 3.3 times the size of their economy, well, isn't Australia's residential land market also a bubble? Because ours is also worth about the same share of our economy. It's I don't know when this thing's going to burst. Hopefully it won't be too aggressively. Hopefully it'll be like the sort of Melbourne correction that we've had in the last sort of 7 years, whereby it's just gradually, fallen in real terms and incomes have caught up and that sort of thing. But it could also be violent. So, I don't want it to be a violent crash because then that'll have a lot of fallout for a lot of people and the economy, et cetera. It'd be better if it just, we have sort of like a New Zealand style or a Canadian style, deflation would be a lot better. But who knows? Like, we're the more this madness happens and the more prices keep going up and the more detached from fundamentals the market becomes, the bigger the risk of it all ending in tears. And who knows when it's going to happen, but, it's frothy.